I gotta say, I love the concept. You're doing a great service to this industry, so I'm super excited to be here.
Creating a podcast video series that focuses on the amazing stories within our space. Hey, contact center, customer experience friends, welcome to episode 9 of Origins and Journeys. Today, our very special guest is my friend and the queen troublemaker, Jill Blankenship. Yes, I came up with that term because you are. So for those of you who don't know Jill, she's the CEO of Frontline Group, LLC, a serial entrepreneur. You've created multiple companies underneath that, the Frontline Call Center, Frontline Services, Turnio. You've also you're like on the board of the Funhouse Commons, right? So Jill is a serial entrepreneur. Let's leave it at that right now. So Jill, thank you for joining us.
Thanks, Fred. Happy to be here.
Yeah. So as always, our intent is to inspire the next generation of CX and contact center professionals through sharing stories of people that come up through the industry in various different ways. We want to change the narrative that contact center and customer service jobs have no future. I mean, we have all personally met entrepreneurs, executives, technology people in our space that started as agents or junior level leaders or bought into the industry. It's about time we started to celebrate these stories. And who better to do it than us? So there's never any sales pitches on ONJ. The content is absolutely free for you to use. Share it out with your agents, share it with people. Please feel free, use it. All we ever ask is just subscribe on YouTube, follow us all. There are ways you can figure out how to get a hold of all of us through LinkedIn and the various different methods of social media. So with that, Jill, let's jump into your origin story. Tell us, how'd you get into this crazy world of contact centers?
Well, it all started on a little island. So back in 2005, I was living on Orcas Island in the Pacific Northwest, and I had moved there after my divorce, and I was raising my 3 kids and trying to figure out, how I was going to make a living and support them. And part of the problem with living on Orcas Island was that it's very seasonal. And so it was great about 4 months out of the year and busy and prosperous. And then the rest of the year, all the tourists left and it got a little dark and cloudy. And I had to figure out what I was going to do because I really wanted to live there. I thought it was a good place for us to be. And I was working 3 jobs at the time. And one of them was selling real estate. And so I just sold some property to a financial planner, and I didn't really know the right questions to ask, but I said, what can I do here on the island that doesn't depend on the seasons or someone walking in the door? And, how can I build a company here? And he said, you really need to look at starting a call center. And I was like, well, the island's pretty small. There's only 4,500 people there. Why would I do that? There's not very many businesses, not really understanding the concept of what a call center does. And he said, no, you could hire your agents here and get your customers from the mainland and from the rest of the country. And I was like, okay, that sounds really big, very daunting. But let me dive into it. And I did. I started reading, researching. This was, again, back in 2005, where the technology at the time was coming from prem-based to the cloud. So the timing was really ripe for someone like me who didn't have money to invest in, big tech stacks and things like that I would have needed soon, earlier. So it was funny because back in the day, there was Call Center Anywhere and Call Center On Demand, Oracle products that were new and exciting to learn about. And anyway, it took me about 6 months to put together a business plan and come up with some startup not really knowing how much startup I was going to need. And I just dug into it. So it was very, it was new. It was exciting. It was different. It was something I could wrap my head around, because I knew the experience that I wanted to provide for companies to rely on us to handle their customer support, to have the best customer experience. And so, yeah, I think maybe the benefit is that I didn't know a whole lot about it. and then it was, by the time I got into it, it was too late to get out. I was already, sold on that this is going to be my new journey. And so from 2006, kind of corrected the technology side of it and really started thinking about growth. I started as a 24-hour call center. Not that I needed to have a 24-hour call center at the time, but I'm like, go big or go home. And then found a national broker, and he brought us our first big account. And from there, it just really took off. And it was exciting to be able to provide year-round employment for people that lived within the San Juan Islands. So it wasn't just me that was struggling for that security and that consistency with employment. And then, so that was 2005. In 2013, another opportunity came along, and that's when with In Contact, NICE now, but it was In Contact at the time, came to me and said, hey, we're growing our ecosystem. We'd really like to have you participate in, growing our certified implementation partner program. And that's when I really started identifying with my strengths, which I think are recognizing niches in the industry and filling those niches and gaps. And so that was really exciting. There's a lot of growing pains with that one. But I started Frontline Services in 2013, and then, just kept building upon that. I like to keep my companies separate because they're run differently. The contact centers run a certain way. It has a certain model. The services side is definitely more professional services, managed services, integrations, implementations, certainly different skill sets. And then from there, again, just really saw what was needed, not only for other customers like myself who use the technology, but also, what can we provide out there for companies to grow their own. So I had the advantage of both, of being able to see from the customer standpoint and then from the user standpoint for other companies. So from that, I've just been curious and continue to ask questions, and the industry is changing rapidly. One of the interesting parts of my journey has been in 2007, I realized that, I'm going to outgrow my workforce here in the islands. I need to start putting together a remote team. And so that's what I built out in 2007. And today we have with all my companies, all my employees work remote, and we're able to do that quite successfully. And that came in hand a couple of years ago when companies, they didn't have a choice. So remote working is something I fully support. I do see that it's very successful and can be very productive when done right, but there's a different way of managing your team remotely. So it's really come kind of full circle at this point. Now I'm really looking at how can I work with other companies and building their ecosystems. How can I better build my relationships, my partnerships? Who do I really want to work with? And I have the pleasure of being able to develop that around me. I would say the next parts of my journey are, now that I'm getting older and my children are grown and I have grandchildren now, to free up some time. I definitely want to enjoy that part of of my life at this point, and I have a great team around me, and everyone works really hard every day to do the best that we can to provide services and better and better adapt to this ever-changing industry.
Yeah. So just to make sure I'm back, right? I had a little technical issue there, which I know normally we don't say, but I've gotten used to the platform that we use, and I know it's going to show up on the recording, so I might as well call it out. You guys can hear me fine? I'm back.
You're back.
Awesome. Okay. So this is part of the challenge of doing an unedited, consistent rolling stream of a conversational, cast. It's, sometimes we have problems, and you just got to keep moving. So, but I caught all your pieces, and we've talked a lot about your beginning. So I want to go back to the very beginning. Because as you know, I mean, the whole point is to inspire the next generation, right? So this guy, I'm assuming male, I think, that told you should get into call centers. I mean, was he a contact center guy? Was he a call center guy, or did he just randomly pick that out of the blue to tell you to go start this?
He wasn't in the industry at all. I think what I really admired about him is he understood business, and he understood the economy, and he understood the island. He had moved his family to the island, and they had come from San Francisco. I just think he had a broader sense of, what the possibilities could be, and he knew my situation, and it was just one of those messages that I didn't say no to. I just embraced it and took off with it. So I'm forever grateful and thankful to him.
Yeah, that's crazy that he just went there, right? I mean, of all places, call centers.
Well, but I think that also gives a message when, people are brought to you for multiple different reasons, and to listen really closely when you're brought together, and to also understand the right questions to ask people. So there was, I was paying really close attention to what that message might be.
Interesting. So you got this thing kicked off in 2005.
Yeah.
You actually spent a little time. You had to jump on the phones. You had to do the work.
Oh no, I was all things. I was probably there for a good 18 to 20 hours a day. My first, I had a little office that I had rented in town, and it was right by the school, so the kids could walk over there after school. Like they were pretty much raised in the call center, and that was our second home because I was there all the time. I was taking calls. I was the supervisor. I was the manager. I was the bookkeeper. I was the marketer. And I think that's the other thing that I've seen, especially working with other entrepreneurs and startups, is those are the hats you've got to wear. You don't necessarily have the resources to build a full team, so you've got to be that team. At least initially, and know those different parts. So when you do bring people in, you can understand them. I mean, even at the different levels that we hire at now, having the experience of the different types of support that we offer are critical to managing the team and to growing the team. I mean, culture is a huge piece of importance for me, and that again has had to be tweaked and churned over the years. But that understanding of who's on the front line, no pun intended, but kind of a little bit, who's on the front line every day and doing the work is really where it runs from, right? So it starts there. Everything else from that experience runs off of that first contact.
Yeah.
And so that's just been critical. And we've had all different kinds of crazy accounts, that I'm like, I didn't know that I could answer questions about, foreign languages or, a device for high blood pressure, or, just all the different things that you can do to help people. And that's really, even if people are upset and angry, and it's like, you can control that call, you can make someone's day. And those are really good times thinking back. And every call was different because as a BPO, and you have a blended team, you don't know where that next call is going to come from. So you've got to be pretty aware and alert of what you're talking about, who you're talking to. It's a very, it's a much more skilled profession than I think people give it credit for.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, and it's getting even more skilled. The fact that the simple self-service type of calls are now being managed, hopefully appropriately with the right bots. The fact of the matter is it's getting more and more complex. So obviously you kind of pulled yourself through this. You've grown in the industry. You expanded into technology. Which is not easy, by the way. I've known a lot of BPOs in my years in this industry that tried to go into tech and failed miserably because it's two totally different practices, right? I mean, different people, different personnel, different methods. And and then you've also done all kinds of other startups, right? I mean, you've got your hands in a lot of different places. That's got to be a challenge for you. I mean, what's the Funhouse Commons? I looked it up, so I know, but for other people,
it's a nonprofit on Orcas Island. Yeah, and I did my term, and but it was a fantastic organization on Orcas. It's a nonprofit. Consider it like a Boys and Girls Club.
Yeah.
For the kids there. And, on the island, there's about 700 kids. Generally, the parents that do raise their kids on the island are working. They need an after-school program. And on a little island like that, there's very little resources for kids, including sports. It's like we didn't get funding this year for football or something like that. Those are real problems that a little island has. And so there was a group of people who actually donated the land, built the building, put together the infrastructure, and I'm really proud to say I was part of that organization for several years.
Nice.
I utilized it as a parent, and then I was able to give back as, more in the role of being on the board and helping to run the board. I was the president of the board for a couple of years, so it was great.
Yeah, that's cool. So speaking of kids, one more question, and you tell me. I think this is a safe question, but did the kids follow in your footsteps since they grew up in the contact center? Are they in the industry?
They're not. They're not. They're all over the place. I have a son in the military. So proud of him. I have another son who's an artist, and my daughter, she's a mom and is 4 kids, and so that's her full-time job right now. They're still fairly young. They're in their early 30s, so there's time.
Okay.
I keep trying to pull them in. I'm like, you'll love this. I know you will.
Yeah, mine aren't either. So I get it. Mine decided to take a whole nother path, and
Totally.
That's all right. Nothing wrong with it. Neither of them got into technology either, which actually kind of surprised me. But yeah, they have their own lives. It's all good. All right. So let's get into the open forum section. This is where, we've got the staged questions as always, but, let's just talk about some of these things. And in particular, with bringing you on, it only made sense to talk about entrepreneurship, the things that you've done, the things we've all done, the things we've experienced, because I get a sense with a lot of the people that I talk to that either they're thinking about it or they've tried it and have failed, but really running a business is not for everybody, first of all. We all know that. But it clearly is something that I think globally even, but definitely in the U.S. is really being pushed almost by this entrepreneurial porn on, it's a funny word, right? I think I heard it from Rennell Richards from the industry. He calls it entrepreneurial porn, but it's all the stuff on social media that makes it sound like it's so cool to be an entrepreneur. Although they always leave out the 20-hour weeks of you doing, or 20-hour days of you doing everything. They never talk about that stuff. But let's hop into this first. So going back to your beginning of this journey, today, if you had an opportunity to go back, what advice would you give yourself or future young entrepreneurs that you wish somebody would have given you early on?
I would probably give the advice that you should always think about where your next dollar is coming from. Always. That should be a daily practice, because you might get some money in, right? That's coming in. Hopefully reoccurring revenue is a good thing. But, for growth, how much maybe you're going to need another $150,000. Not knowing where that's going to come from doesn't solve the problem. And I think the key is that you're constantly looking for where that next piece of your growth is coming from, and whether that be like small business administration, there's different loan opportunities. All of that costs money. All of that takes collateral. All that takes time. Interestingly enough, just this last year, I ended up getting a line of credit for frontline call center and frontline services. That process took 14 months. And and thank God I didn't need it yesterday, because that would have been a problem.
Yeah.
But it's things like that you should always just be conscious of, and always asking yourself that question, am I making money today or am I losing money today? And if I'm losing money today, how much am I losing? Because I feel that's probably the biggest reason why companies go out of business, is because they run out of money. Yeah. They don't run out of passion or energy or, the drive to succeed. It comes down to where they run out of money.
Yeah. Okay. Artie, how about you? What would you tell your younger self or future young entrepreneurs?
This is a really good question. So you guys may not know, but I've started 7 different companies. 3 of them are still in existence. 4 of them I either sold off or decommissioned. But I think what I would tell my younger self is you don't have to be the best. So whatever industry you're in, or whatever product or service you're trying to provide, you don't have to be the best. You just you can't be the worst. You can't be a horrible business, service, or product. Middle ground is totally okay. And lots of businesses succeed in that middle ground, even the lower portion of that middle ground. And that's okay. You'll get better at running a business. Your business will get better as you scale, as you grow, as you learn as an organization. But you're not going to do it day one. You're not going to be the best in the market. And if you are, hold on to that wild ride as best as you can, because your company may outgrow you. I've seen this with very successful companies where CEOs and co-founders, they essentially got voted out after their businesses outgrew them. So just something to think about. You don't have to be perfect.
Okay. Jason?
I think for my younger self, it would be, what are my actual strengths? What am I actually good at? What do I enjoy doing? And then in terms of a book on my shelf is who, not how, who could do these things instead of how can I do it? But like Jill was saying, in the beginning, you have to wear all the hats and do all the things, because you might not have the financial resources to find people to do all of it. I think it's also a really important thing to understand. Are you a good solo entrepreneur leader, or are you a better partner where you want a yin and a yang to tackle it, right? Can you do it all, or do you want to do it all? Do you like doing it all and leading it all with a team, or do you want to have a partner to hold you accountable? And or in terms of what Gary Vee says, some people, like myself, I toyed with this for years as well. Some people are just a really good number two. Like he says all the time, number two at Facebook still is really rich, right? Number two at Microsoft is still really rich. There's nothing wrong with being a number two if that's who you are. And I think there's a lot of people that have that entrepreneurial spasm, as Michael Gerber has, watch the entrepreneurial porn like Ronell talks about, reads the 4-hour work week and gets the whole message completely wrong and then thinks it's easy, which it's absolutely not. And it's not the message of that book. And, but people I am a really good number two, for example. I have my own business and obviously I'm doing what I can to make it successful. But then when a client hires me as a consultant, I'm basically their number two doing everything for them. And then it's my sweet spot and my strengths, right? And so I think it's really important to understand and be honest and also know, like a lot of people are like, I got to start a business and I need to be an entrepreneur. It's like, maybe not at this point in your life, right? Life is long. Maybe that's, an endeavor when you're later in life and older. And it's like, you don't have to do it now unless you're willing to just be punched in the face for a while and you have the tolerance for it.
Yeah. So mine is work on the emotions and awareness of who you are, where you excel, where you don't excel, fill in the gaps. But most of my challenges early were I didn't have a good control of my emotional awareness, meaning that I would get really excited about the new shiny objects. And I would drive that, and I could always solve a challenge. And I've always been a puzzle, guy who fixes, problems, and people have used me in that way. But as an entrepreneur, you really have to recognize when your emotions are fooling yourself, and how to take advice. I mean, emotions have so much, there's so much great advice that I was given young that I didn't listen to, because emotionally, for whatever reason, my mind is like, yeah, I already know that. I already do that. Well, no, I didn't, because obviously I made all those mistakes. But work on that stuff. And like you said, Jason, you want to be an entrepreneur? Awesome. Love it. But pick your time, pick your battles. If you find something that's a problem and no one solved it and you're 20, great. And you've got a solution for it, awesome. Freaking do it. But be aware that you're going to take some punches to the face. So, I mean, that was my biggest challenge. I had a problem with understanding and being aware of my emotions and how they impacted the way I thought and did things and stuff like that. So,
I would say one more piece of advice that I firmly believe in, no matter really what you do, if you're going to do as you're devoting so much time to a certain area, like a business plan is a necessity. It's kind of a pain in the butt to do. It can be lengthy. It could not, you could be like, I don't even know the answer to that question yet. You've got to have some kind of plan as to the direction and the outcome you're going in. And that takes a plan. And sometimes people, again, can have a great idea. They can see it evolving. They can see it starting to come together. But because they didn't have a true plan, then it fell apart at a certain point that had they done the plan to begin with, they could have anticipated that or foresaw something that they could have corrected sooner than later. So I'm an advocate for a good business plan. There's score.org, which is, again, another nonprofit that you can get a template of a business plan on. I'm not a representative for them or anything, but yeah, that's what I've used. I mean, it's kind of old school, but it does the trick, and it includes everything that you could possibly think of that could happen and will happen in that plan. And the more preparation you can put towards that, and it's a working document, things change. Like my plan today is not the same plan I had 17 years ago. But by revisiting that and repurposing that as a work type practice, I think that can solve some problems before they happen.
Hey, Fred, I want to point something out / ask a question of the group.
Okay.
So I think one of the things, like you said, Jill, is it's a living document, right? The business plan. A lot of people like create one, they put it in the drawer and they're like, cool, I've got it. I check the box. 5 years later, they pull it out and it's like, what the hell was I thinking? And I didn't even know that. Like, you don't know what you don't know, and there's no way you're getting, like, that's where I think that stuff is a painful exercise, but it's good to have some direction. At least know I want to go from California to New York.
Right.
No idea what's going to actually happen, but at least I know where I kind of want to go to. The question I have, though, for everybody, because you guys have a lot of experience in this, is really around when do you pivot and change, right? When is what you're doing the right path and you're inches from hitting gold, right? Or diamonds? Or when is it like just a brick wall that you're never going to get through? And where is that, like, if don't give up, keep going, or you need to change directions or die?
Yeah. For me, there is a moment in time in a few of the startups that I was involved with where when I took a step back, my vision and, mission and all that stuff were still very true to me. But I realized that the market fit wasn't there anymore. Or it had shifted, or the work to get it back in alignment with market fit was too much, and I didn't have the funding to or the technology didn't own the code. But there were things that kind of just gave me a clear indicator that this particular business is not going to work long term. So, but you have the responsibility of clients. You have, in this case, it was a software provider, basically a managed service. We had responsibility to clients. We had to wind down. We had staff. It was tough, but you kind of come to that point where if you're really being genuinely honest with yourself, it's time to start to unwind whatever you have to and pivot. But that's just me. I think there is a moment where you realize that, or at least I did.
Yeah, I've got a kind of a story. So there's this TV show. I think this was on probably about 5 or 6 years ago, where this team of people are going out to, I think it's northern Greenland, and they've got a team of people. You got an archaeologist, you got someone who's an excavator, and basically their whole goal is to go and dig up gold. And that was their project. That was their business plan in the beginning. They bought tons of equipment. They flew out there. All of these people were doing planning meetings ahead of time. They get there and they find out that the glacier that they were going to, start mining gold for has receded farther than they expected. And about 3 episodes into the season, they realized, shoot, we should probably look for other rare materials like diamonds and rubies and emeralds instead, because that's just what our resources are, and that's what we're looking at this point in time. So their business plan completely changed, and it's all the way until the last episode. Spoiler alert, but I'm sure no one will watch this episode. But instead of bringing home gold, they actually brought home rubies. They found kind of a ruby mine at the end. So I think to kind of everyone's point in business, you can start with an amazing plan. You can see that potential outcome. You can start to execute against it. But a true entrepreneur who's successful has to get out of the day-to-day, get out of the weeds while the business is running, and see whether or not it's working or not working, and then start to make decisions to pivot. And a true successful entrepreneur can either see that they're hitting pay dirt and hitting gold, or now I'm pulling up rubies and I got to pivot because I'm not a ruby expert. I need to hire someone who understands that this red shiny thing is more valuable than this gold thing that we pulled out of the ground. So I think that's important, and no one does this perfectly. I think as humans, things change, and in business, businesses are run by humans. We all make mistakes, but I think a key component to this, and if you don't have someone on your team that is analytical, go find someone today if you're not that analytical person, because you may be hitting pay dirt. It's just you don't have a way of measuring it, or you're not the expert in that dirt that you're pulling up. So that's my recommendation.
Jill?
Yeah, those are great stories. And examples, because there is that honesty factor and it's humbling, right? We have to get past our egos of, having to be successful to, I'm either too soon to market and I need to pivot because my money's not going to last to get me there. And those are really hard things to realize, but if you have to, and that is, I think, that key to being able to do it again and again is know when to shelve something, know when to pick it up again, or take it in a different direction. The pivot is critical. That is a big part of it, though, and you've got to wear both sides of that. The little things on your shoulder saying you can do it, it's going to hit any day now, and the other one saying turn around and and redo things. So that's great.
So, Jason, I also have a recommendation for those people listening, and you may have already known about this, but do you know Gino Wickman, the creator of EOS, the Entrepreneur's Operating System?
Yes.
Okay. So
yeah.
he put together a bunch of new content recently about, he's got like a test you can take, on likelihood of being a successful entrepreneur. But the reason I bring him up is the EOS system, is such a fascinating way to run a business. And I wish I would have learned about this earlier. But if you're looking at how to constantly be aware of, the numbers, your business, how it's growing throughout the entrepreneurial journey, and how to recognize patterns and how to communicate this openly with all your team, I'm a big supporter of the EOS system, and it gives you visibility and accountability across the entire org that as you grow into EOS, it kind of makes it impossible to miss those moments where, oh crap, things aren't going well consistently, because part of the EOS is like a weekly meeting, consistent, transparent information and data. But if you're a solopreneur, that's a challenge because EOS won't work for you, right? It's just you. So you can put your accountability KPIs and you can do all those things and kind of force yourself into it. It's not really what it was designed for, but nonetheless, it gives you something to measure on a weekly basis. And if you go back and look at it, every single week, and are consistent with it, maybe you'll see the patterns, just as if a larger group. But I would highly recommend anybody looking to get into entrepreneurship, take a look at his work and the EOS system. And I'm not a paid sponsor, clearly. So yeah, I mean, just a tool. Does that help, Jason?
Well, it does. And I think, it's this tough thing I see in myself and others, and where, there's the chasing after the shiny stuff, like maybe that's the thing, or I should do that, or not even like, let me try this totally different business. Let me just adjust my product or do this or go that. And it's like, was this the right path and that's the wrong one? I had a mentor that helped me with that earlier this year, and his biggest advice, which was really helpful for me, and I think applies, is it's not the right path or the wrong path, or is this the right door or the wrong door? It's like, what's the better path? He's like, constantly analyze your business, but also meditate and think about it and spend time thinking. And like, what is the better path? Do I create this course? Do I offer this product? Do I go after this market? Like, what's the better? Because there is no right or wrong, and you'll never, you can beat yourself up when you look backwards all day long.
Yeah.
But I think that's I think that's helpful. And then there's a book that's been on my shelf for a long time called The Road Less Stupid, which I think is a fantastic book. And it basically says it's not about making the right decisions all the time. It's about making less dumb decisions and making less stupid mistakes. And so if you can make less fatal mistakes, then you will succeed just in general. And it really advocates thinking time, which I think is what a lot of us don't do enough of, especially as entrepreneurs, is, oh, let me just carve out an hour today to just sit and think and ask myself questions while everything feels on fire or everything feels urgent or, that kind of stuff. So I don't know where that plays in. Like the three of you, when you've been in that mode, right? Where that time, is it something to do in a short term, or is it like, all right, I'm going to spend this half day a month or this, sign up for a retreat so that I can be forced to have to think about my business, right? Which is sometimes what happens, right? You have to excavate yourself from it in the moment.
Yeah, it's working on the business, not in the business. But it's hard. It is hard to do that because when you're at work, or even when you're not at work and you're blocking off your schedule, you've got people that depend on you. You've got that monkey on your shoulder until, maybe 5 o'clock at night when the people turn the lights off, and then the monkey goes to sleep a little bit until the monkey wakes up at 6 in the morning. But there's, I find myself like shower thoughts. Like when you're in the shower and you have no technology and you're like, oh, okay, that thing, like, you just solved my business problem by just thinking about it for a minute or 2 minutes. Or we talked about this in the last podcast. I like to go on walks with my wife pretty much every day, as many times, multiple times a week. And sometimes I'm just completely silent because I'm just in my own head thinking about the day to come, the week to come, the month, the quarter, the year to come. And those are those times where I can reflect. And then when I don't have those thoughts, I can at least socialize and have some good family time as well. So I think it's valuable. It's just to be able to do that and put yourself in a safe space where you're not going to be interrupted is extremely hard.
Yeah. How many of you follow your intuition? How much importance do you place on that intuitive drive that forces you to maybe have to sit down and look at something because it just won't leave you alone?
Yeah, it's essential. If, in my opinion, we learn a hell of a lot more than what we read or what we think about. The learning never stops as you're watching people, as you're experiencing the world. So if you're not following your intuition, then there's a problem. Because how many times are we right? And now you can't, I think you follow your intuition, but then you back it up with data. Right.
Exactly.
Because there's still the piece of the human brain, the id, right? That voice in the back of your head that likes to tell stories to either protect you in some way or gain a positive emotional feeling. I don't want to say it but nonetheless, that little voice in the back of your head that can swing you either way. You got to recognize that. But yeah, intuition to me is so important. As part of your day-to-day decision making. But I find, Jason, I sit in my head a lot. I don't purposefully. Let me tell you what I do. Every Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Saturday, Sunday, I'm in the gym. When I'm in the gym lifting, which is my thing that I didn't share on the last episode that just came out, which is my mental health thing. I put my headphones in and I'm focusing on mind-muscle connection. And at the same time, I'm constantly thinking about business choices, directions. That's where usually I solve the challenges, or at least come up with a plan to work on solving the challenge, is within those moments when my mind isn't focused just solely on solving that challenge. Does that make sense? I mean, that's my purposeful time for both removing myself from, life and taking my break and, also letting my brain process and solve challenges without even really, I guess, that separating, once. I know, like Gino Wickman says he takes he takes a tremendous amount of time off. I don't remember the exact numbers, but it's an insane amount of time off to like half the year or something like that. It's nutty, but he takes a lot of time off to spend in his own head, and working through those things. So I don't know that there's a right answer for anybody, but
Yeah.
I mean, I'm purposeful about it, in my gym time.
Well, and I think what's fascinating, and I remember someone speaking on this years ago when I was in Toastmasters to what Artie was talking about with like in the shower, these ideas come. And he was actually talking about how that's a thing. Like, since our bodies are made up of mostly water, when you're in and around water, that's when it can hit you. You don't have your phone, you're not near anything, like literally you're not distracted with anything but the shower. And then something about being in water, under the water, like around it, where that can trigger that kind of like deeper sense. I've actually done that on purpose in my consulting company, where it's like, I got this challenge. I literally don't know how to solve it. It's driving me crazy. I go and take a shower and I'm like, all right. And I grew up in California during droughts, so it's not like I'm that guy anyway, but I'm like, I am going to stand in this shower for as long as this takes until I figure this out. I do not care how long this takes. And you just let go and then just like thinking about things without the distractions. So I think that's fascinating, and how much science might be there, Artie, with what you're saying about, when you're just around water, touching water, and then like, what happens.
Farm boy growing up in Iowa, my job in the shower was to get clean and get the hell out, because of that well. You never know what that well water actually contained. But it's fascinating. Some of my favorite moments of actually thinking, like deeply thinking, was up at the North Coast when I lived in Santa Rosa. There's a place called Bodega Bay that the Bodega Head, you sit up above, outlooking the ocean and the sounds, and just that time and moment would be very still, for my mind, and be able to, I guess let my brain go wherever it wanted. This is not where I planned on taking this, but this is good. So let's hop on to the next one. What's the number one challenge? And Artie, I want to start out with you. What's the biggest challenge as an entrepreneur that you've seen, and how do you approach it?
Yeah, I'm gonna piggyback off of what Jill said earlier with intuition. So the way that I think of it, or I've seen it in the past, at least self-reflecting on my past companies that I've started, there's really two things. It's creativity and intuition, that feeling, gut feeling, am I doing it right? Should I do it this way? Being creative, starting something from scratch that doesn't exist, creating a service or a product from scratch. That's the creative brain, the intuition brain. That's what we like to call gut feeling. And then there's the analytical side, having a concrete business plan that's rooted in KPIs and metrics and knowing what your market is. You have to have both. The way that you tackle both of those in your brain, or the way that you organize your teams and set up their tasks for the day, month, year, or quotas, whatever you want to call it, is a key factor to your potential success. And the way that I think about it, and the way that I've tested, at least personally, I've seen that working with my gut, with my creative side, versus the analytical side, or at least doing that first, or putting that ahead of the analytical side, is more successful than the other way around. And the way to think about that is, do your KPIs and numbers and metrics and your business plan dictate what you do as an organization, or do you dictate what you do and then you justify what you did based off of the KPIs and metrics and results and outcomes? So that's what I'd like to throw out there is, if you're going to be a true entrepreneur, you have to have both, but you also have to figure out what works best for you and your organization. And I tend to lean more on the creative and intuitive side.
Okay. Jason?
So which part are we specifically talking about now? Which part do we want to tackle?
The biggest challenge as an entrepreneur, and how do you approach it? What's your biggest challenge? Because
I mean, I guess I feel like there was a bunch of stuff that, in the first part is kind of the keys to success, which is the opposite of the challenges. I mean, my biggest challenge is not chasing lots of shiny things, thinking I'm going to find a better option, a better solution, right? My biggest challenge is fundamentally feeling like I could boil the ocean. I can do everything for everybody in terms of sales. And I think I can do it all. And why not? And then so unfocused that nothing actually gets done, or not a clear fit, right? And so it's one of those things where I just feel like, hey, anything is possible, almost too hopeful and too possible, versus like, all right, here's this one thing I do for this one group, and staying that focused. That's the biggest challenge, just thinking like, hey, why not? Fred, you and I have talked about this a lot. It's like, hey, I can help everybody. Who do you know? And you're like, I don't know. What do you actually do? It's like, well, here's what I do, this, and this. It's like, well, okay. But, and I think there's value in that. And then there's, it's every strength is also, if something is too strong, it's also a very big weakness to watch out for.
So what do you do, though, to combat it? I mean, obviously it's a big challenge for you. What are you working on? What's your tools so far?
The biggest thing is to really focus on the priority and what is the most important thing. It's tough because I want to say priorities, but I heard on a podcast recently, it's like the definition of priority is the one thing. So you can't have a plural of something that is a focus on one thing, because now it's a focus on one things, and that's not the thing. Like, all right, what are my top 10 priorities today? It's like, well, that's now no longer the definition of that word. And so it's about understanding that bandwidth is limited, even myself, even team, even resources. Like, if I'm going to do this over here, it means I can't do this over here. And so how do I prioritize that, and what's more important? If I do this, I have to stop doing that. And then what is the most scalable? Because I think one of the biggest challenges, and this is where I appreciate Jill and your background, is creating scalable operations and companies and businesses where it's not about you and it's not time for dollars specifically on your own. And so I think it's about, all right, so what can I do that can create more leverage and more business without me having to do everything all the time?
Yeah, that's a great segue from my biggest challenge, which as an entrepreneur, your bandwidth is absolutely limited. And yet, so the next step to that is now you've got to delegate. And then you're like, now if everyone would just do it like I do it, we'll be great. So I would say my biggest challenge is understanding how other people get things done. Because they do. We all just do it different. And so, especially, I'd say the last 5-6 years, I've spent a lot of time focused on that. I mean, again, I think one of the things that really drives me is empowering others. Like, I want to see everyone succeed, right? So I'm very transparent and want to help where I can, but you've really got to understand what makes other people tick. What are their strengths? What are their weaknesses? How do they communicate? How do they execute? How are they going to bring things forward so that it's a win-win situation? And that's been really important to me, and it's something I'm still learning about, because there's a broad range and you can go in a lot of different directions, and identifying what those things are. But as you grow, it's inevitable. You will have to work with others, and you will have to rely on others and depend on others. And so it's a challenge.
Fred, before you jump in, I think, Jill, you mentioned it's a challenge, but if you overcome that challenge, I think that's one of the most rewarding pieces of being an entrepreneur, is seeing your team. Literally, one day you just turn your head and you're like, wait, am I even needed here anymore? My team is so successful, productive, and they're doing it in a better way than I even thought I could do it from scratch. So I think it's also rewarding as well.
And sometimes it's good to go on vacation to see that happen, right? I mean, sometimes I have to force myself to get off the grid and just allow all that magic to take place. And you're right. It is also one of the most rewarding things that there are in business.
So mine is fear, and I'll unpack that a little bit for you guys. It's been fascinating for me in this whole path. Early on, it was the fear of not being enough, the fears around, not being capable, of doing it. And those were always there and lingering. And then it became it kind of morphed as I became more aware of who I was, my skill sets, my capabilities. It started to go to the fear of not doing enough. Is it big enough? How do I stretch? How do I expand? So my biggest challenge has always been fear. And it's rooted in the people around me, right? I don't want to disappoint, family members, friends, and then as you grow, you don't want to disappoint your employees for making a bad decision. And, the number one thing I've always found is I surround myself with people that maybe they're a mentor and they don't even know it. And they're people I bounce ideas off of. They're people that are willing to challenge me, to call bullshit when I'm, when I need it, to kick me in the ass when I need it, or pat me on the back when I need it. I become more self-aware of that fear and recognize the triggers, and that's what I do to try to work on it. But my number one challenge has always been rooted at the core in fear. And I think fundamentally, humans, that is our number one challenge, pretty much across the board when it all boils down to it. But mine has always been exacerbated in different ways just because of different trauma as a child. So that's me.
Fred, do you think that fear subsides once you've had enough at bats, or your business is to a certain scale where you've passed through the meniscus and there's less resistance to its inevitable growth and success? Do you think that fear gets better? I'm trying to ask this question for young entrepreneurs that also have that fear. Like, is there a light at the end of the tunnel for them?
There's a light, but the fear doesn't go away. For me, it shifts. Yeah. It changes its direction and its path, and your id will always try to either go back to your fundamental nature of either fight or flight. So do I protect you? And if I need to protect you, then, we're obviously going to pull you back. Or if you need to fight, depending on your nature, do I need to push you forward? And maybe it's not necessarily the right time to move forward. So I would say as you mature with your emotional awareness and who you are and your mission, vision, passions, all the things that you grow over time, it's easier, but it doesn't go away. That stuff just changes, in my opinion.
I totally agree with that. Like, I started, for years, had the fear of failure, right? Literally nightmares. I would wake up in a cold sweat, with the kids and I, sleeping in a tent on, somebody's front lawn, to the point of now I have the fear of missing out. So I want to be part of everything still, and I can't do everything. So I think it shifts. Yeah. I really do think it shifts.
Jason, do you want to weigh in?
Well, and what's interesting is I gave a nice surfacey tactical answer when you asked what I struggle with, but it's the underlying root is the fear, right? Yeah. It's either some fear of making a mistake, looking bad, failure, scarcity, worry. All of that is then what drives the chasing shiny objects in myself. And then in most people, or it's the fear of missing out. So they're chasing lots of shining objects, but that's the underlying thing. And I love that you brought that up, Fred, because it's so important just as humans to understand and dig deeper until you figure that out. And then what do you need as a mechanism with that, right? Yeah. Is it journaling? Is it an accountability partner? Is it, whatever you need to do. Some people, they have to make a bet with somebody else to donate money to a charity or a politician they absolutely hate. And that's motivation enough for them to not want to lose that bet, right? And that will get them going. So you really got to find what works for you to then, feel the fear and do it anyway.
Yeah. Yeah. What do you think, Artie? You didn't answer your own question.
Fear is definitely a factor. When I think of iconic entrepreneurs in the past, Steve Jobs being the one that comes to top of mind first of all, maybe like Elon Musk, if he's controversial, but successful entrepreneur who's done multiple different things and's not afraid to turn over every rock and see what's under it. And sometimes there's scorpions that sting you under that rock, and sometimes there's a rock full of diamonds. And sometimes you find scorpions and you turn them into diamonds. You turn them into a scorpion farm and sell scorpions. So it's all about the mindset. And I think of the successful entrepreneurs who are iconic, they have that fear, but they squash it. I think the fear of missing out, the fear of creating something amazing that the world will just stand by and go, whoa, that was innovative. That fear for them is bigger than the fear of, if I do something and it's wrong, there's going to be repercussions for my team and myself and whatever that is. So I think if we can take from those traits of, fear of missing out's a little bit more higher priority, to Jason's point earlier, than the fear of, if I do something, there will be some sort of repercussion that's negative.
It's interesting. I think there's a balance on that, because I know a few people who are driven by building something, and then they build like 20 things, and not a one of them gets done. Not a one of them is successful, and they continue to do the same crap over and over again without looking for product market fit, without looking at how do you build something and get it out to the market, where does sales. I mean, there's so many people out there that think in that are driven by just, I gotta build, that they just never follow through. I think there's a balance in that. And maybe that's where, Jason, what you said, I think it's maybe where some people need that secondary person where, in EOS, there's a visionary and there's an integrator, right? A visionary is the person that comes up with the ideas, thinks big, likes to challenge, for big things. And then the integrator is the one that actually gets the shit done. That actually gets in, gets their hands dirty, figures out, holds people accountable to their commitments and moves things forward. I think, I don't know. I mean, it's such an interesting conversation because there's so many different ways to success. And again, defining success however each entrepreneur defines it. Maybe it's just open a couple of restaurants and feed my family and make great food and live life and, that's it. Pass the restaurants on to the kids. There's nothing wrong with that. It's not in our kids.
And there's a book, it's called Company of One, which advocates for that, right? Of being a company of one. You can have contractors, subcontractors, some people may be helping you, but this feeling like if you're not building the next Facebook or even, building what Jill has built, right? If someone's like not on that level playing that game, then they're a failure and they're not succeeding. And what he says is, you have a small company, maybe you're a consultant and you make $300,000-400,000 a year, which is way more than most people make, and you have a good lifestyle and you don't have to deal with employees and other stuff. Like, is that wrong, right? If you make $200,000, if you do that, is that wrong and bad? Like, you got to play the game that you've got to play. Yeah. Obviously, as the authentic persuasion guy, like I've got to say that, but like, I think that the key is that you just figure out what game you're playing. And not what you should do, which I think is the key. That's the problem. When I watch a lot of Gary Vee stuff, I'm just like, especially the people who ask him questions, they're all like trying to be this thing. And it's like, but that's not you, man. Like you be you.
Yeah. So rapid fire on this last one, because as usual, we're running running up on that hour pretty fast. So Jason, I want to start out with you. So according to the recent numbers that I've seen, 90% of all startups fail. For the listeners, first of all, why do you believe that 90% of business, because that's a big number, 90% of startups fail? Why? And we kind of talked through some of the things to avoid. So let's just start out with why, and let's just have a conversation about this quick.
Super quick. Michael Gerber wrote a book called The E-Myth Revisited. It's the entrepreneurial myth, not the electronic myth. Has nothing to do with the internet. And I think going to kind of what you guys talked about with the EOS is companies are started by either a visionary, a manager, or a technician. And most companies are started by a technician who has an entrepreneurial spasm, as he says it, where I'm good at making websites. I could go out and do this on my own. I should start my own website making company. I'm going to go do that. And they literally don't understand everything that Jill talked about, which is all the different hats, what it takes to be in business, sales, marketing, accounting, taxes, all that stuff, right? They just want to make websites. And so what happens is they have that spasm. They literally do not understand. And then they just lose because they can't figure it out. And I honestly think, especially because I see a lot of tech founders who are the key salesperson, but literally can't do anything other than tech and maybe getting some people on board, that if they don't fix that and build around them, they will be a statistic.
Yeah. How about you, Jill?
Go to Artie next.
Okay.
Still thinking of it.
I got it.
Okay.
No problem. I'll pick it up. Customer-centric focus. So your customer today may be a different customer or may want something different from your organization a year from now, 3 years from now, 10 years from now, or it may stay the exact same. It doesn't really matter. But the goal is in everything that you do as a business, try to think of the customer as the center of the gobstopper. If you're designing a product, we usually call those users. So usually we hear things like user story. It's like, oh, I want to design this new feature for this new product on this app. Well, tell me what the user story is. And that user story should be, as a user, I want to use the app to do this action, perform this task, or complete this task. And if you can't describe it in the user's words, or if you're not a product team and you have got customers, if you can't describe it in the customer's terms, then don't do it. And that thing changes over and over again. So that's why businesses fail. They lose sight of what the customer actually wants and needs, and sometimes they just don't pivot. They don't change or adapt to where their market went to.
Okay. Can I try to reword that? Do you basically mean if you are not solving or not aware of the problem that you solve, then you're going to fail? Is that pretty much?
Yep. And it's a living, breathing thing. It's not we solved it, now let's archive it. That's the process forever. You have to go and revisit that on a regular basis.
Oh yeah, needs constantly change. So Jill, are you ready, or do you want me to go?
Well, I'm gonna go back to and Artie. That's pretty much what I was gonna say. No, I'm gonna go back to money. I mean, it comes. This is, we're not playing with pennies and dollars here. It costs a lot of money. It costs a lot of money to start, continue, and run companies. Money's always going to be in your face one way or the other. You think you might have all the money in the world one day, that can change. So to me, the number one reason why businesses fail comes down to money.
I think for me, when I look at most of the people that I've known who have tried the entrepreneurial journey or have done it and spent a year, built something, and then it crashed. However, one way or another, it didn't work out. The one thing that I always kind of go back to is it seems like ego got in the way. And one way or another, they didn't ask. They didn't surround themselves with mentors.
Their ego didn't allow them to ask for more money.
Well, I mean, going to ask for money and you don't have, the plan that's a whole different. I can't tell you how many times I've seen that, but I think fundamentally it comes down to ego. And if you're going to be an entrepreneur long term, you got to remove that one way or another. And that goes back to my number one challenge, which is the fear. I think the fear drives the ego, right? So whatever reason, I'm being a little heavy on the psychology today. I don't know what's going on.
Well,
We've identified ourselves a lot more after this session. Thank you, Fred and Jason.
Don't worry, it's only 150 an hour.
Yeah. Wait, I thought the podcast was free. And I think when it goes to the ego, and I think the culmination of what some of us said too, is that I made this mistake, and I try not to keep making this mistake, which the resolution is sell, build, sell. A lot of people build, sell, and then fail, right? Instead, sell it, then build it, then sell it again, then keep building it, instead of, falling in love with what you think the world needs, right? Which only one company really truly did that, which is Apple. When they came out with the smartphone, nobody thought they needed in that way, but it wasn't brand new. It was just new, and then they won. But otherwise, most companies don't.
Yeah. So with that being said, Jill, thank you very much for joining us. It's always a pleasure to talk to you, but to have you on, this has been great. Hope you had fun. Did you enjoy the?
I did.
Okay, good. So for all the audience, from Artie, Jason, and I, we appreciate you guys. Sorry to go a little deep on this one. It was all good, though. I thought it was a lot of good content. So hope you guys enjoyed it. We appreciate you, and we'll see you in a couple of weeks on the next Origins and Journeys. Thanks, guys.
Thanks.